We are live on YouTube. This is Complete Man Podcast, episode number 20, and we are live in 3, 2. All right, welcome back to the Complete Man Podcast with your host, Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
Hey, Nathan, I'm doing pretty awesome, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I am loving the background for your set. I can see your book back there. I can see like this cool bookshelf with a bunch of books behind glass. It's coming together nice, man. I like it better than I remember the old days when you had the window and the logo was there, which was cool, but I like this a lot better. It just looks classy, man.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. That's because I switched offices. When we went through the renovations, I actually built my office in the basement instead, so I could get some privacy. So I'm down here. It's nice because I'm on a different floor than my kids. They're at school now anyways, but when I want to get my work done, I can actually get it done properly.
Nice. All right, so what do we have on the agenda for this week's episode of the podcast?
Well, it's a very important topic, and a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and CEOs have been discussing this. And it's this upcoming looming recession, especially with the inflation rate at where it is, the interest rates, skyrocketing, and the real estate market. You know what? It's a tricky one, especially here in Canada. What's happened because things have been so overinflated in real estate, incredibly overinflated. Um, and what does that all mean for businesses? Because like a lot of people are puckering up right now, trying to figure out how they're going to deal with this recession that may happen. I think we're already seeing signs of it, but how do businesses actually get through it successfully? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
So here in America, we like to do this thing where we redefine words depending on whether or not it hurts or helps the current ruling class. So we've just recently redefined recession to avoid admitting that we're already in one. By the time this episode comes out, I don't think it'll be possible to deny it anymore. But so let's talk about. I've lived through at least 3 major recessions throughout my life that I can think of. I remember the 80s in America, we had a pretty big recession. 2008, we had another pretty big recession. And it seems like it's almost undeniable that we're going through one right now. Does Canada, do you guys kind of go through the same ebbs and flows at the same times as us? Or okay, 'cause our economies are pretty well tied together.
Yeah, we're neighbors, so we experienced something very similar. Ours was a little bit different in 2008, and the only reason why we did have a housing bubble that popped. But the only reason why we were actually able to get through it a lot stronger was because of our banking system. Our banking system is far, and I'm going to say this, superior and stronger than the American banking system because of rules and regulations. I'm not saying that for any other reason but I used to work in the banking sector, so understand. Out of the top 10 banks in the world, we're talking about stability, 5 of them are Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you something. In terms of, and so we had tighter regulations, so it was still bad, but not as bad but on the flip side, here's the other challenge too. And I say this all the time is Canadians are way more risk adverse. So when it comes to capitalism and entrepreneurialism, yeah, we have some great people here, but people are very avoidant. I'll give you an example. This recession, let's just say if it hits hard, and I did this actually in COVID. This is something that I learned. I actually went out to some of the politicians here and I said, hey, look, COVID is going to crush businesses. This is before they came out with a grant for businesses. And I said, I'm willing to provide free services for group training for business owners if you guys can promote it and get the word out there. And I will do it. I will literally host these sessions every 2 weeks. I'll hop on a call with this group of business owners and we'll figure out how to get them through this recession. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get people to bite on it. Even for free. Like that's how ridiculous it was. And maybe it was a whole concept of if it's free, it's not worth it. But I was trying to do it out of trying to help people and they couldn't dig themselves out of a ditch. They just didn't want to. And so that's the difference here as well. And I am afraid that in a recession, a lot of people, this is the biggest point I want to point out here. It's not the recession that kills businesses. It is not, because recessions will actually make a lot more businesses successful and brand new businesses and startups successful. It is how you react to the recession. That is essentially it. How you prepare for it and how you react to it. And a lot of it has to do with how you were actually positioned before the recession as well, because I could tell you, a lot of people don't have liquid cash, or businesses don't have liquid cash sitting there to be able to weather these storms. That is the number one factor. Risk management for the average business, excuse me, is non existent. You have it in larger corporations like banks, for example, because they have to. They have to. Anybody that has a regulatory body typically has some kind of capital requirement, liquidity requirement, to say just in case they go under or there's a tough time, they have that buffer. That's not existent in the private sector. Most businesses will not exist if they shut their doors down for after 3 months. They're gone because they don't have enough cash to sustain their cash flow payments.
Mm-hmm.
So they're screwed in the first place. So how you prepare prior to that is important, but then it's how you react. And we saw this in COVID where a lot of people just went belly under because they just didn't know what to do. They froze. And it comes back to that core concept, Nathan, what business is truly about. And it's these three things. That's it. If you understand this, you'll get through a recession a lot more effectively. The first one is business is all about creating a customer. Okay. That's what it's about. Secondly, it's about keeping that customer, turning that customer into a client. Third thing, right? That's not mine. That's from Peter Drucker, the most famous management a consultant in the world, who's no longer around. But I added a third one, which is turning that client into a super fan, right? Turning them into advocates. If you do that throughout a recession, you are going to be successful. You're going to be a lot more successful than your competitors. And I could talk about this for hours, Nathan. If you have any questions, let me know. But get this: it's like let's just say you're driving down the street with 20 cars, right? Let's just say highway, because that's a little bit better, or freeway, a 10-laned highway, and you're driving down, and you're right beside 9 other cars, and you're driving down, and there's a tornado right in front of you. Right? You're all hitting that tornado at the same time, but it's how you react to that tornado that's actually going to get you through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so think of those 9 other vehicles as your competition. Now, this is where it gets fun, right? Because knowing how to react effectively, you can come out actually more successful than your competition, because they might just get wiped out. So if you think about it from that perspective and you say, let's make this fun. My competitors are going through the same pressures, the same challenges that I am, right? Maybe to a varying degree, but they're essentially going through the same storm. If I do this properly, if I navigate the ship properly, I'm actually going to be more successful than them coming out. If you think about it from a mindset perspective, that way, you're going to come out a lot more effective and in a better position. Whereas people who panic, they clinch up, basically, they say, stop all spending. It's a doomsday. They're the ones that go out of business, or they struggle significantly.
Mm-hmm. I kind of see the same thing, the same scenario when it comes to like disruptive technology. When new technology comes in and makes it a lot easier for an upstart to come in and challenge a contender. I'm thinking about like the new AI tools that are coming into the art world, where people can create these beautiful pieces of art just by telling different AI tools what they want to create. I'm thinking about in copywriting, there's new tools that help business owners write pretty effective copy. I mean, it's not on par with the great minds of copywriting yet, but a couple years from now, it probably will be. Lawyers, I saw something recently that they have an AI that can out argue top dollar lawyer. It can find more citations and more reasons to, and more objections faster than a high paid lawyer can. So, but we can look at these things and we can look at them just like an economic recession. We can be like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. or we can look at them and be like, okay, how can I use this? How can I leverage this? A lot of people are going to think that their career is over because there's a new tool that makes it a lot easier to do their job. And then other people are going to be like, oh my gosh, this makes it a lot easier to do my job. So it's one of those things, like you said, it's the tornado. How you respond to it is what decides whether or not you make it out on the other side.
Yeah, and you mentioned some interesting things because you talked about the paintings, you talked about the legal aspect, and you talked about the copywriting. The interesting thing, because I've tested out a couple of those, I haven't tested out the legal aspect, but the interesting thing is it lacks one thing, and that's personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the people aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even on the legal side, if you take a look at legal arguments, what ends up happening, it's a person's personality that gets involved, right? Regardless of whether you think it's all facts, it's not. The people look at people's demeanor, their person's character when they make a final decision. So all of these things come into play, and it goes back to the three elements that I talk about in my book, Superfans. And if you haven't gotten a copy, you can get a discounted copy at superfansbook.com. Is the PSS strategy, which happened to be my initials as well, but people, strategy, and systems.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be better equipped. Now, again, I talked about people, I talked about strategy, and I talked about systems. If you focus on your people throughout a recession, that's going to help you significantly. If you focus on your strategy, right, have a strategy, that's going to be even more important. And then your systems. So those are three things to focus on through a recession to get you through. And you're right. What ends up happening, it's like an injured lion. What ends up happening when the leader of the pride, that lion, is injured? Well, another one comes in because he smells the blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot easier for him to take over now. Same thing happens in business, right? There's going to be blood spilled. And it's going to be maybe some of your competitors. And I don't like to think about it from this perspective, but it's an analogy that I think a lot of people can relate to. Is this is your opportunity to actually gain traction, gain market share. I'm not, and some people will do this. I personally don't like to play this way. I like to be competitive, but I'm not out there to go slit my competitor's throat. That's not what I like to do. Um, but if you do want to capture, I like to play fair, and I am competitive. But if you do want to capture some major market share, this is the opportunity to do it. Have that mindset, and you'll be a lot more successful.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier. In a lot of people listening might not know this, and I'm not sure exactly if it's the exact same way in Canada, but I know here in America, money is imaginary. It's not real. It's something that they just print up out of thin air. And for a long
We call
time,
that Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is just about as real as the US dollar is. Um,
Yep.
And for a long time, we had something called fractional reserve banking, where the bank, if they had $100, they were allowed to create $1,000. They could create 10 times as much money as they actually had. And so they could loan that money out, and it just came out of nowhere. And then you had to work to pay it back and whatever. So it created a lot of debt. And then recently they just lifted it. They said, you know what, you banks here in America, you can just print as much money as you want. You don't have to have any reserves. And that was kind of a response to the money printing machines go brr during the COVID pandemic. We were just printing money like it was crazy. You mentioned earlier, though, like businesses having cash on hand, having some sort of liquid cash so that if they hit a hard time, they won't go out of business in 3 months. Our politicians don't live by that philosophy. Our banking institutions don't live by that philosophy. The majority of the people in this country, and it seems like it's pretty much a worldwide phenomenon now, at least in like westernized countries, most people have way more debt than they have assets. And so when something like this happens and you say, well, if you're a business owner, you should make sure that you have enough for at least 3 to 6 months. I mean, most people don't even have enough to make it to next rent. And it seems like it's not just like a business owner problem or a average worker problem. It seems like it's a problem that permeates our entire economy, from the banking institutions to the politicians who just spend money like crazy. Uh, we're trillions, I think $20+ trillion in debt now. So from the very tippy top all the way down to the bottom, it seems like what you're suggesting is the exact opposite philosophy of our entire economic uh, worldview.
Yeah, that's a conflict, that internal conflict that we have in the economy, and politicians they acknowledge this. And the tricky part is, how do you really help? Let's just say if it's Canada and the U.S., right, 300 and close to 400 million people really start to save money. It's very difficult, and have a thriving economy and line our own pockets as politicians, right? Like, how do you balance all of those three things together? Um, so it's tough. So first of all, that's why the 401k, for example, the RRSP system here, they're trying to promote people to save money. I, I don't think it's aggressive enough. I think they can do a lot more in terms of helping people save money without taxing them on their savings. First of all, I think that's just really screwy, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. All the tax system, first of all, needs to be changed when it comes to your what you're talking about, the government debt. If the tax system was actually changed, we would actually have, I believe, a healthier system, because we are about taxing the middle class and the poor, and the corporations get away with a lot. So that is one thing that we need to tackle. But then it's people's mindset. The older generation, it's interestingly enough that they had a better mindset when it came to saving, because they faced higher interest rates,
Mhm.
right? And you think that's kind of goes against the grain, but it makes sense when you think about it, because yeah, they were forced to say every penny we spend is going to cost us something, and we're going to pay interest, this much amount of interest on it. So therefore, we should save before and have the cash before we buy something. That's how
Mhm.
my parents were. When they came to this country, A, they were immigrants, so were they stingy anyways, but B, they were just like, we got to buy everything cash.
Mhm.
Everything is about cash. My parents had savings, and when they were even making less than minimum wage, it was just kind of ridiculous now that I think about it. But a lot of it has to do with mindset. A lot of it has to do with, hey, live now as well, right? Our generation is really about living now rather than living later. And there's some pros and cons to that, but there's a shift and a value difference from that perspective as well. But this does trickle into business. And I will say, and I know we're coming up to time here very soon, but and a lot of people may find this harsh, but there's a lot of people in business that shouldn't be in business,
Mhm.
because they don't understand the concepts. And I'm going to throw this out there as well, because I have a personal vested interest. This is a business that we are in. But if you're going to be in business and you don't know anything about business, or very little about business, and you haven't gotten the help, get an advisory board, get some mentors, maybe some free help. Go out there. There's chambers of commerce. There's, your local city might have a small business initiative. Learn so you can actually get those skills. And if you still don't take the initiative to get those skills, then you might not be right fit, right? Because we talked about, where do you get confidence from? Confidence comes from competence, and competence comes from learning new things, and building your skill set. Having a business is a skill set. Getting through a recession is a skill set. Once you go through one and you learn the ropes, you're far more likely to get through the next one. So I'm not saying this to beat people up. I'm saying, if you want to get through this recession effectively, get the skills and knowledge to do it before we actually get into a full blown recession.
Mhm. So I 100% agree on all of that. And I know that this is something that you actually offer to your clients, is helping with stuff like this. So I think it would be a disservice to the audience to not let people know, if they wanted to get a hold of you and talk to you about this stuff. What is the best way to contact you and maybe start that conversation?
Sure, there's two ways. Email is one, team@sangaworldwide.com. Or the other one is, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Please send a personal note if you're going to send me an invite and say you've listened to this episode and you're interested in chatting. Um, Far more likely to accept it, because I think there's a lot of scam and spamming happening on LinkedIn now, so we don't accept a lot of invites. So those are the two best ways to reach out. Again, the email is team@sangaworldwide.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn.
All right, man. And if people want to check out more episodes of the podcast, where's the best place to do that?
Check out YouTube for Men. We're promoting this channel more and more, and we're getting some good subscribers. So thank you very much for supporting us. And if you can hit that subscribe button, I would definitely appreciate it.
All right, man. And until next time, we will catch you later.
Till next time.